Hello, my beautiful soul, and welcome back. Today we are talking about the fourth insight from the Celestine Prophecy. And if you haven't already watched on the first three insights, please pause this video, go back and watch those first because they're obviously very interconnected. So this one adds upon those. But I'm very excited about this insight, and I feel like there's so much to share and so many really amazing examples that the book gives that really drives home the way that this insight influences our lives. So I am pumped to get into it. Before I get into it, if I start drooling in the middle of this video, please forgive me. You know when you bite your lip and then you keep eating after and you end up biting it over and over and over again? So like the other day, that's what happened. And my lip is like really swollen and it hurts a lot. And because of that, I feel like my talking balance is really off and I'll just start kind of drooling. So just wanted to give that disclaimer before I continue, because welcome to my life. If that's what happens, then we're gonna roll with it. So with that said, the third insight was all about understanding that the universe is made up of energy and we are made up of energy, and energy is connected, it circulates. When you are in the presence of something that is like very beautiful or very tapped in, you kind of like feel that loving presence, or you feel the presence of the energy. And when you're around maybe someone or something where it's more fear-based, more anxiety, stress, like that negativity has a different vibration, a different feeling, and also can look different. And I forget if I touched on that in the third video, but I know it talks about it in the book of like when you start to tap into understanding energy and just being aware of it, you start to notice like the vibrance and the radiance and the brilliance of the colors. And I know the book gives examples in nature, and I know for me that's a huge place anyway, where if I go somewhere that's like so rich and like you feel and you see, and the colors of it are so vibrant, and like even when I'm just really in a flow state and I'm out walking, you know, the trees and the leaves and everything just looks so much more beautiful. And so that's because in those moments I'm being a lot more aware and connected to the energetic principles. And you know, most of us live our lives just going through the motions, thinking about the physical stuff, very unaware of what's going on energetically, and we miss out on a lot of the colors and a lot of the beauty. Leading into the fourth insight, it now takes us into a really, really interesting place in terms of psychology and human desire for control. So this insight number 4, is actually called the struggle for power. And it has to do with something you'll relate to very deeply in your own life, I'm sure, and be able to come up with many different times where this happened on multiple angles, like where you were trying to gain control, or where you were feeling like you had no control and you were feeling more helpless in that energy. So we're going to touch on all those different types of the spectrum. But what's so beautiful, let me just pull open this insight. So they speak to once we realize that like everything's energy, right? Once we kind of understand the third insight, then the fourth insight is a matter of seeing the human world as a vast competition for energy and thus for power. Once humans understand their struggle, we would immediately begin to transcend this conflict. We would begin to break free from the competition over mere human energy, because we would finally be able to receive our energy from another source. And this is so cool, right? Because let's look at power dynamics in relationships. And I will just pull on the ones from the book, which were very relevant to me in my own life in different ways. And so I think you'll definitely relate to them too, because it covers all these angles. But one of the first examples it gives is a young child, and her parents were being very controlling. Like the dad was yelling at her, asking and demanding her to do more things. There was no respect, right? And eventually the child in the book lashed out. She like screamed back and ran away and left the room. And this is like a very typical experience from childhood that hopefully is becoming less and less typical nowadays with more conscious parenting. But I think probably you can relate, where parents feel like they are maybe doing what's right, or they are unaware. So this example, they dive into how the parents, probably that was their normal, and so they weren't even like conscious about what they were doing, but they were trying to control the child and basically draining the energy from the child while trying to maintain control and power. And the child at this point, because, you know, as children are, we're very much more helpless and looking to our parents, looking to authority. So the child was like losing and draining her energy. And the only way she felt that she could maybe get that back was through matching the energy of her parents. So yelling or kind of lashing out was the only way to then kind of break that or potentially gain more power, right? We also look at like politicians came to mind like immediately for me as I was reading this, because what do you see during political parties, during the stupid commercials on the TV? And all it is one person poking another person, insulting them, judging them, criticizing them, condemning them, like pointing out flaws in the way they think, look, speak, the things they're wanting to bring into political office, right? The changes they're wanting to make. It's just like it's literally an attack on the other person. And when you think of this in terms of energy, the only benefit from that is that the person who is the attacker is gaining or like drawing in the other person's energy, and therefore feeling bigger and more powerful, more influential, right? And unless that other person retaliates and then now does the same thing back to them, you think of like, yeah, I just keep thinking of like two people standing at the podium, and it's like this political debate going back and forth, and it gets out of hand, right? It's two people trying to pull energy from the other person so that they feel more powerful, or they feel more strong, or more in control, more influential. And what's really cool about this experience in the book, I haven't personally experienced this with seeing energy fields the way that it describes it. So the book talks about the main character seeing an argument between an older man and a younger woman, and the way they're retaliating, and he basically sees like the energy fields enmeshing with one another, and as the older man gains more power, it's like he's sucking her energy from her, right? Which would potentially cause her to kind of collapse or feel smaller or disheartened or whatever. But then she would retaliate and like say something back or kind of snap or whatever, and it was like he could see her pulling the man's energy field now into hers and kind of collecting. And it's like this interweaving of energies, right? This is happening all the time, even though we might not see it. And I know I haven't seen it in that visual of a way, but I have experienced this so many times where I look at certain relationship dynamics and I can feel the sense of like this person is totally just harnessing their energy. Like this person here on this power trip is trying to put themselves on a pedestal and make everyone think that they are right and that everyone else is wrong. We see this very often with manipulation or with very toxic relationship dynamics or narcissists, right? That's actually probably a perfect example, is a narcissistic partner who is kind of gaslighting, manipulating, influencing the more helpless person, we could label them as. What is the benefit of that other than they are gaining energy, they're feeling more in control, and they're kind of taking the life force from this other person. Now, if this goes on too long, like the example in the book with the young girl, the life force of the so-called victim, I don't like that word, but we'll use that, or the more helpless person, the life force just gets more and more weak. There's no energy for that person anymore. And I know from my own experience, different times in my life where I felt very defeated and I felt very helpless and very small. My energy field at that time was so weak and I was very influenceable. It was very easy to get pulled into other people's dramas, other people's stories, other people's need to control. This is why it will trigger people, but I truly believe this is why I also attracted a lot of more unhealthy dynamics, because I didn't have an empowered sense of self. And so if there was someone who was like that taker or that narcissist or that person who feeds their own energy field by feeling in control of someone else's, I was like the perfect target for that, because back in the day, I was just this really insecure people pleaser and I was like not confident enough to stand on my own or make my own decisions or feel confident in like believing that I knew what was right for me. And so if someone else showed up that was very firm and confident and like, oh, matter of fact, this is what you need to do, or I can help you with that, or come here, you know, like I was very influenced to believe because my energy wasn't very strong at that time. And what we understand and what the fourth insight continues into afterwards is speaking about the fact that because human beings for so long have been disconnected from source as the provider and source as the main energy channel, we look to other people to get it from them. So the truth is every single human being on the planet is connected to source. Every single human being on the planet could tap in, and whether that's through meditation, breath work, movement, like it would look different for each person. But when you get into your own little vortex, your own little flow state, you are channeling the divine and you are feeling this sense of embodiment, of like empowerment, right? I know for me, like I feel like I'm vibrating in this beautiful state and like feel magnetic. I'm empowered. I'm not looking elsewhere for someone else to tell me the right thing to do because I'm just like so tapped in. We all have the ability to do that, but very few of us were taught that as children, and very few of us grew up in societies that modeled that, because our societies all modeled controlling one another, right? Everything in the media, everything in the news, everything in culture, everything in family dynamics, like politics and government levels or authority, even with teachers, right? All these things that we experience are pretty much modeling a need to gain power or control over one another. Rarely, I mean, maybe on occasion, but rarely like straight across the board Were we taught to respect and empathize and love one another, even if they saw differently than us? Most parents, if their child wasn't seeing things the way they wanted, most parents would try to control it and dictate and say, no, don't do that, or you're doing that wrong, or you shouldn't say that, or you're seeing that thing wrong, you should do this instead, right? They are controlling the child's energy field, and they're trying to get it to match them. That's the exact same with teachers in the school system. It's the exact same with higher levels of enforcement, governments, all these things that are other people who have decided that they have the right or the ability to dictate everything, and they are going to continue to manipulate and control to feed the energies of the other people. And we could get like way into this in terms of like galactic levels and stuff, but I'm gonna refrain from getting into that. But it's very much a real thing that we experience, right? And we've seen or dealt with. The next example, which I think is probably one of the coolest ones, because also I know I've experienced this before too, is when you're around someone who is trying to control and they're trying to maybe assert themselves or be more in power. Typically, I mean, I mentioned gaslighting or manipulation before. This example in the book wasn't about that, but it was more about instilling fear and doubt into the other person. So there's a man who was kind of saying like, oh, you're not safe doing this thing and you shouldn't do that, and that's a mistake that you are here, right? Like, he's instilling doubt and planting these seeds of doubt into the main character. And because of that, then the main character started to kind of like question himself and be like, oh gosh, maybe he's right, and now I'm feeling a little bit more anxious and I'm not feeling secure in myself. And so you can think of your own energy field in those times, or just your own physical response in those times, is like we collapse more and more inward. I know when I was the most insecure and the most anxious I've ever been, all I wanted to do was like shrink away. And I would just, whether I was like at home or in public things, my shoulders would collapse, like my head would kind of like slump down, my shoulders. Everything was about taking up less space because I was just like, I didn't trust myself. I didn't feel safe or secure or strong in who I was. And that would be because of like so many seeds of doubt and fear planted in me, and the things I was influenced or people I was influenced by at that time, the level of trauma and stuff I was still navigating that was like right at the forefront. And so I just felt really small. And you think again, someone who's in that place is even easier to then continue to control, because you have a guy like in the book, or a politician like in our current world, that then comes in when this person is already feeling fear, they're already scared, they're already anxious, they already don't really know what to do because everything's just so confusing and so much, and they're trying to take it all in and they don't know which way is up. And then you have this confident person who comes in and plants more fear into you and says, don't do that thing, or why are you thinking that? You need to do this instead. Come with me. I'll protect you. I'll show you the way. I'll make sure everything's good. That is 100% a control dynamic, because that person, that authority in that example, is benefiting off the other person's smallness. They are truly sucking energy from that person. So the most beautiful thing we can realize from this insight is that truly you take your power back when you stop giving it to other people, and when you realize you can connect and receive it directly from source. So I will even be honest of times in my life where people weren't doing the things that I wanted them to do. And typically this comes down to family, because like I think of my dad immediately. Like, we've had struggles for years because he is being who he thinks he should be, and who he is. It's not necessarily what I need or wanted. And for a long time, before I started kind of my spiritual awakening and all my inner work, I would try to control him. And I get so frustrated, like, why can't you just do this? Why can't you just be this for me? Like, how many times do I have to ask you to do it? And like, no matter what, it never worked, right? That was me being in my own control drama, as they call it in the book. So I didn't feel, which is true, I didn't feel connected to source to receive my needs, or receive the energy, receive the things that I needed or wanted at that time. And so I was looking to my dad and being like, why can't you be more? Why can't you do this for me? Like, all these things, trying to control him and his actions and his energy in order to get what I wanted, right? And I guess all these examples have seemed a little bit more negative because they are kind of intense examples to run the point home. But this can also happen just in a conversation with a best friend, right? Where you both have beautiful hearts and you both have loving intentions, but you both see the world in different ways, and maybe there's an opposing opinion, and maybe it comes to a point where one person's trying to kind of convince the other, which is more like an influence to take the energy, right? And to gain energy. Or it could be like underlying manipulation at times. And so it's not that, I mean, I think if we practiced it for a long time, and maybe as humanity continues to evolve, maybe one day it can truly get back to that, where we can be so deeply connected to source. And my cup, which is part of what I focus on, but I'm still nowhere near perfect, but if my cup can be so full because of my connection to source, and I can feel so genuinely loved and supported and held and empowered in knowing who I am and what's true for me, what's not true for me, then I'm no longer needing something from an interaction. So I do have a lot of relationships nowadays where I don't really need anything from you. I don't need to be perceived higher than you or be on a pedestal. There's no need to like be right. Like, we can be like, there's a bigger level of neutrality, but it took a lot of years of work to get there. But I think what we can find is you'll start to notice that the more you connect to that, then the more confident you'll feel to set the boundaries or not get pulled into someone else's control drama. So if someone authority-wise is trying to take your energy or distract you or distort your sense of reality, your sense of self, that they're getting off on your energy, the more you're connected to yourself and to source, the more you're going to be aware of that playing out, and therefore you can do whatever is needed to not be siphoned and not be in that dynamic, because that's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for them either, whether they realize it or not. So you can only control yourself. And when you realize it and you make a boundary or no longer associate with that person or shift the level of what you're giving them or available for, then you are able to come back more into your own sovereignty and in your own energy, and then continue connecting to source to fuel you and build you up, right? And ideally, we get to a point where then we continue to attract more people who are on similar wavelengths, who are also doing the work, who are also not trying to control or manipulate or be in that power struggle. because there are a lot of people on the planet who are still in that, and they do get off on the power struggle. But there are many who are more at a place of like, I just want to be me, and I want you to be you, and like we can love each other, support each other, we can also disagree at times, but I'm not going to try to make you be someone you're not. I'm not going to try to control you or manipulate you to get what I want, because I am connected to source. So I can get things the way that I need them or the way that I'm meant to without needing to take from you. And ultimately that's what the fourth insight is about, is like, there's a beautiful part in it. I won't find it because it'll take me, I'll end up spending time flipping through. But there's a beautiful part that talks about even wars. Like, wars would not be started if people could sit together without their control drama. Because even if we saw totally different perspectives and it's like we're not seeing eye to eye at all, but if I am not trying to manipulate or gain or take something from you and vice versa, then even if we don't agree, even if there's very different values, like I would not need to overpower and assert myself and feel like I need to gain control, right? If we're both connected to source and not needing, then there's a lot less place for that kind of control and influence to come into play. So it's really, really beautiful. And lastly, oh, do I want to get into that? Because I just opened it to that part, is sometimes we have people who give their energy and it feels really good. So that's the adverse or like opposite example, right? Is that you can be with someone or be around someone and their energy is like really invigorating and really lights you up and feels so good. And it can be that addictive energy, which is beautiful, as long as, once again, then you're not, the more you try to take their energy, the more you are kind of enraptured in it, then the less you're also realizing you can still get that energy from source. So like that person's magnetism is beautiful, and yes, you can like receive it or get connected with it, but ultimately at some point that is going to leave you defeated or depleted because you're thinking that that person is the access point, when in fact you are also the access point. So to me, the fourth insight and this whole struggle for power is also just a very deep reflection on personal sovereignty and how humans in general have been kind of programmed to think that another person is going to give us the energy, or that they're the source of our happiness, they're the source of our sadness, they're the source of our pleasure, they're the source of our pain. And therefore we're always trying to control and manipulate depending on what we need or what we want. And the truth is like source itself is the source. It's not another person. So we will never actually be fully satisfied when we're looking for that from outside of ourselves. And that's why finding it from a higher power is the most freeing thing you can do. And although, like I said, I'm still very far from being perfect with this, I would say that has been one of the most beautiful parts of my own personal journey over the last decade or so, is like looking at how much I outsourced. And I did need to, like, if you're not doing what I want you to do, now I'm upset, or now I feel disempowered or angry or small, right? Or if you're looking down on me or trying to take my energy, now I feel like I'm lacking. Or if I don't have this thing, right? Constantly looking for things externally. And that's why it's so beautiful, and I'm so grateful for the connection I have now to a higher power and to God, because truly, like, without a doubt, I know God is the provider of all of it. And so that's the connection that I want to continue to maintain as much as possible. And that feeling of like being filled up by source, and then the physical, the people, the materialization, manifestation, the things that show up around me are like the bonus, but the connection to source is what actually fuels me. And that is accessible at any time, at any place, without conditions. And the beautiful thing is that the more each person finds that, the more the world will change, because we really wouldn't be relying on someone else to make us feel better or to perform in a certain way so we feel good enough, or to provide, to protect, like all the things. And we wouldn't feel stuck under their control either, because we would just be like, I know who I am, I know what's mine and what's yours, and I can feel charged up by a loving source creator. So that is the fourth insight. Please, if you are reading this alongside me, definitely share your own breakthroughs or thoughts on this insight in the comments. Let me know what resonated the most for you, and I will see you again very soon for insight number 5.